Hello, everybody. Thursday. I almost said November. It's October. No, it's September. It's September, right? Okay, yeah. It's September 21st, 2023. Wow. I was off by 2 months initially. And I've had coffee, so I've got no excuses. Appreciate the delay to everybody in the Linchpin, or understanding the delay. I had to take my daughter in for a dentist appointment, which is always a really special treat with a 2-year-old because you just don't know what their level of compliance is going to be. But we survived. So today's a little bit off track, but we'll dive in and I'll make my way through as many questions as we can. I'll try to keep a good pace going because I forgot about that dentist this morning, and so the day's it's running away from me. But here we go. We'll dive right in. Okay, going with the most upvoted questions from the Linchpin private Facebook group and the Linchpin squad feature on the BTWB app. So let's see. First one's from Nick B. Was a total chance that Boz programmed Nancy on Monday and you on Tuesday? Yes, I had no idea that he did, quite frankly, and the only reason that I know that he did was I saw that you posted that, Nick. So yes, totally random that we both happened to do it within a couple days of each other. Phil T. Thoughts on the games going to Texas? Location, weather, ease of travel. Overwhelmingly, where's it going? Is it Dallas, Fort Worth, I want to say? It's not Austin, right? Or San Antonio. I think it's Dallas. I think it's great. I'm a big Texas fan, quite frankly. So as far as ease of travel, great. I think big airport, lots of flights. I know it's a much bigger city, and so there'll be more hecticness, I'm sure, and congestion and traffic. And it will most likely be somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million degrees. But what can you do? So, prepare for some heat. Let's see. But other than that, yeah, Texas should be great. Let's see. Next most upvoted is from Veronica S. When you see bad programming, do you say something? And if so, how? For context, I'm a high school teacher and our coaches seem to have the athletes doing some questionable stuff that isn't effective and also seems to be leading to a lot of injuries. I just wonder what your thoughts would be. So, do I say something? It just depends, to be quite honest with you. If it's not my business, and no one's asking my opinion, probably not opening my mouth, to be honest with you. I watch some of the conditioning sessions that occur, with our kids' basketball teams or whatnot, and I most certainly have thoughts as to how those conditioning sessions could be improved significantly, run more efficiently in the whole 9 yards, but that's not my role. And if someone's curious and they ask me, I will provide my opinion, or if somehow the conversation it goes in that direction naturally without me offering my unsolicited opinion, like sticking a crowbar in there and wedging myself in, okay, well then that will happen. But other than that, they're doing their job, and I'm not going to be that parent that walks out there and says, whatever. Now, what you're saying is questionable stuff that seems to be leading to a lot of injuries. So, there's some stuff to unpack here, and this is not Veronica, this is not, going at you directly, but I would say this to anybody. And the first thing is, I think most people feel qualified to assess the validity of programming, but probably are not. And again, Veronica, I'm not saying this to you directly. This would be just how I would, say it in general, because you may very well be, quite capable of assessing programming. But if I think, it's funny, a lot of people will critique a certain thing, and I just don't think most people actually have the level of expertise to dissect, analyze, and really pull apart, good programming versus bad, etc., etc. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, a lot of nuance. Now, some stuff might be so horrifically idiotic that even to the untrained eye, you can be like, well, look at these last 3 days of training. That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. That certainly exists, and that might be more readily apparent to somebody. But I would say it would take a more seasoned eye to identify good versus great programming. Let me go ahead and put it that way. But if you think people are doing questionable stuff, I'm not sure what the questionable stuff means. Maybe that's back squatting with terrible technique, so you wouldn't have to be obviously a programming guru to identify that. Maybe you could just have a good eye for human movement and you can see deadlifts and squats and cleans or something happening with, the high school athletes that you're like, woo, that's not good. And that could potentially be leading to a lot of injury. So maybe that's what you're talking about. And if that's the case, yeah, I guess if I worked at the high school, I wasn't the strength and conditioning coach, and I did trust my eye for what good and bad movement was, and I saw, generally speaking, large numbers of athletes moving poorly with loading or whatever it happened to be, I would probably find it really hard in that situation, if that's the situation you're talking about, to not somehow try to bring it up. Just be ready for the potential fight that comes, because truth be told, most human beings are very delicate creatures, and when somebody approaches them and says, the basis of the message is, I think what you're doing is incorrect and you're doing it wrong and you need to change it, most people don't receive that message very well, even if it's a valid and true message. So, Veronica, if you're going to bring that up in that situation, I would just make sure that you put some good time, thought, and effort into how that's going to be presented, so that hopefully it lands well, it's received well, and both parties get what they want at the end, which is high school athletes having a safe and effective training experience. But that's a tough one. But to me, I see ridiculous, dumb programming all the time on social media, and I just scroll right by it. I don't feel the need to comment. So I guess there are kind of a couple different situations there. Let's see. Scott M. If you had 3 days a week to work with a severely deconditioned and overweight athlete, would you try to get a heavy day in every week, or would you spread those out to maybe 2 every 10 sessions, or even less? Okay, so you've got an athlete, they're coming in 3 days a week, they're deconditioned, they need to lose some weight. Of those 3 sessions that I have, would I make one of them a heavy day, or would I decrease the frequency? Without knowing anything else about the situation, right? I mean, deconditioned can mean a lot of things. That's a big range. Overweight there's a big range there. So without having much more specific information, yeah, I would probably have one of those 3 sessions be a heavy day, right? And heavy day doesn't mean, eye popping, bulging out of your head, screaming at the top of your lungs, west side barbell, nosebleed, deadlift, back squat sessions, right? It could be, heavy relative to that person's capacity, but heavy days are profoundly beneficial. And yes, given the information that you presented to me, I believe that I would have one of those 3 days be a heavy session. Okay, let's see. Eric John. CrossFit defines health as quote-unquote work capacity across broad time and modal domains throughout your life. How would you define health? I actually really like that definition, to be quite honest with you. I know it's a bit wordy, even though there's not a lot of words associated with it, because most people outside of our little world that we run in don't know what in the heck you're talking about when you say the phrase work capacity, and then they don't know broad time and modal domains. What the heck are you talking about there? So, you have to kind of be in the lingo to know that, but if you know what that is, work capacity across broad time modal domains, we can dumb that down to, that's the definition of fitness, CrossFit's definition of fitness. And so we can simplify that even more to CrossFit's definition of health is fitness across your life. And when you present it like that, I think it is a really elegant, nicely encapsulated definition, because you get to have all your metrics moving in the right direction. You're looking to maintain a full range of motion. You're looking to be able to do life's tasks, whether that's be a first responder or play with your grandkid or navigate stairs or shovel your driveway or play a sport, like whatever it is. Functional movements to be able to exert yourself, short, medium, and long, and to be able to do that for as many years as possible at a high level. That's great. I think it's a pretty darn good definition. And you're not going to find success with what you're doing in the gym if you let what you're doing outside of the gym, those lifestyle factors, slide. So I think it's a pretty darn good definition. Joey M, here we go. The question that I knew was coming. All right. In a recent Varied Not Random podcast with Chris Henshaw, the interesting concept of working on our recovery was discussed. This adds another layer of complexity during our heavy days and sprint days, because we have two sides of the coin. Number one, respect those heavy days. We need to rest appropriately so that we can lift heavy or run fast for our next set. More rest is generally better. Number two, keep yourself moving during rest and monitor those periods, possibly even make them shorter to become better at recovery. So those are the two sides of the coin. Like you sometimes say, I think those two concepts can coexist. You got to do some modulating there as well. And of course, it could be different for every athlete and their goals and where they are. That being said, would you consider adding a recommended focus to those days? Et cetera, et cetera. Thoughts about how these two ideas can interface. So, cheers from Canada. Cheers from the US, right back at you. So, Joey, what's funny about this? Great question. And you're thinking about the right stuff. When those words left Chris's mouth, two things occurred. Number one, they were interesting, accurate, valid points. And number two, I knew that sadly some people were going to latch onto them, make things more confusing than they needed to be, overthink their training, and focus on something they really don't need to focus on. Okay, and that's, again, this is not saying you, but when I heard that, it's like, I can already see that some people now are going to be like questioning their rest periods, and now they've been doing what works for months and years, and they're getting fitter and faster and stronger, and their back squat's going up, and this is happening, and their sprints are going well, and my 5K is also going well, and now all of a sudden they're going to be like, I don't know if I'm resting appropriately during my recovery periods. So here's the deal. This is also the good and bad about some game stuff. And Chris works at a high level with a tremendous amount of some of the best athletes on the planet, games athletes, right? This is also potentially, I don't know if I can articulate this properly, where some of the stuff that games athletes have to worry about, to squeeze that little bit out to get just ahead of their competition, who's also in the top, like not even 1%, but fraction of 1% of all athletes. They need to do that to get a couple more points here, a couple more seconds here, got another rep here than you in the AMRAP. Most human beings absolutely don't need to worry about that in any way, shape, or form. And that is the God's honest truth. Because the overwhelming majority of people, regular folks, and by regular folks, I'm talking like really darn good athletes too, okay? I'm just not seeing you at the games. I'm not seeing you in the NFL. I'm not seeing you at the Olympics. You're a ferocious beast of fitness, but you're also just a regular person. And that's okay. And truth be told, for us regular people that are even like really great athletes, it's a very low concern and not something that you have to worry about. Because most of us, what you're trying to do is not just get, let's take the weightlifting example, okay? It's like, all right, well, if you're taking somebody like a top level athlete, that they're so strong that you're trying to squeeze out another couple pounds on their back squat or deadlift or clean or whatnot, but if you look at the numbers, they're pretty much top end. Of course, they're going to keep trying to continue to get strong. Sure, of course. But, if you've got a 600-pound deadlift, and over the course of the year, we bump that thing up to 6.25. Okay, that's great. But that's not going to move the needle that much. It's not like if you have a deadlift that's that huge and you get it to 625 that you probably noticed it anywhere else in your training. You just get your 1 rep max a bit more. So that athlete, yes, they're going to continue to try to bump that deadlift up, but what probably would make more sense for them is they need to be better at recovery between sets, so that when they fatigue on like moderate deadlifts and things like that, they have to rest less than their competitor, and they can go back and start deadlifting again to win the race of fitness that they're trying to do. And so for them, it's like, well, now we're going to start focusing on like, hey, let's work on shortening the rest periods so you can get back on the bar more. You know, that's kind of the road that Chris was talking there, and it's a useful, beneficial road. But for most of us, most of you don't have to worry about that. And so for most people, what you need to do is, you're following well-rounded, intelligently thought-out programming. We're going short, medium, and long. We're covering all of our rep ranges, all of our loadings, all that stuff. So when the heavy days come around, it's going to be a rare athlete out in the general population that now, instead of taking 4 minutes of rest between the 5x5 back squats, says, you know what, I'm just so darn strong already that I'm going to start shortening my rest periods. Again, there's benefit there. Okay, this is not an all-in-one, which is why this is an interesting question. But for most people, under most circumstances, most of the time, the proper protocol is still going to be, on those heavy days, taking the rest that you need to maximize the loading that you can squat each time, if we're using a squat example, okay? Now, if you could also, if you understand this concept, and we want everybody to increase their strength and conditioning knowledge and IQ, there could be some lifts where if you think you have bumped into some place where maybe you don't want to exceed that loading, you're not quite ready to do that, well then playing with a rep range, the rest period, might be a great way to do it. I'll use myself for an example. So the last 2 times that we have done the back squat, 4 sets of 8, I did it at 275, which maybe that's heavy for some people, light for others. For me, that was like a significant effort. Had to have the music right, had to take full 4 minutes rest. It was all I got. Let's say that rep scheme comes up again in another couple months. I don't think I'm going to try to go heavier on that. I'm here to tell you right now. I think 275 is what I got. I did it the last 2 times that it came up. 4 minutes rest between each. I don't even want to put 280 on my back. I don't even put 5 pounds more on my back and try to go for those sets of 8. So maybe a good goal for me would be warm up again, try to hit that 275 for 8s again, but this time instead of 4 minutes rest between each, I'm going to shoot for 3.5 minutes rest between each, and maybe 3 minutes rest, although 3 minutes I bet would be pretty darn aggressive. But I could play with that in that sort of a workout, and even though it would get logged as the same overall work accomplished, I was able to accomplish that work in a shorter period of time with less rest, and that in and of itself is an improvement as well. So you could play with things like that during your training, especially with sessions that you have done multiple times. If you keep the load the same, try to see if you can maintain that load, obviously with good technique, when you have decreased your rest periods a bit. Now where it's interesting, and I think, again, it's good for people to understand the concept, is let's take the other example on the sprint days, which is what Chris and I had discussed with myself in the past, is you look at yourself, you've got a good sense of what your 200-meter runs are, for example, what's considered a fast, medium, and slow compared to the general population, and maybe you look at your run efforts and they're actually quite good. You're pretty quick at the 200-meter dash, 8 by 200 meters, and maybe you're resting, let's say, 3 minutes between each. Well, now you're probably maybe not going to get significantly quicker on those 200-meter repeats, but what you could do, if you're already quite quick, what you could do is now try to maintain that pace, but shave a little bit of the rest period off and see what it does. Or you could slow down just a little bit and shave a decent amount of the rest period off. And all those are good training sessions. But for most people, under most circumstances, what will treat them well, general physical preparedness, general population, trying to make it happen each day with an hour of their time, is going to be on the heavy days, taking the rest periods that allow them to lift the heaviest and safest, and on the sprint days, taking a reasonable amount of time that allows them to go hard and fast on the run. That's going to work for most people. And then when you find yourself bumping into those limits, you can play with them. I had one other thing there I wanted to say that I have lost. Oh, give me a second here. Oh, now, what I do think is useful for most people, and most people should play with, is I don't think it treats, and this was something that Chris was talking about as well, and I agree with him on this, I don't think it treats most people the best to just plop down and sit in their butt between levels of exertion. So for example, you're doing that 5x5 back squat and you're going to rest 3 or 4 minutes, and during that 3 or 4 minutes rest, you just sit down and don't do anything. You don't move your legs, you don't move your body, you're just scrolling around on your phone, and then, you realize it's time to get up and lift again, and you just walk over to the bar with legs that have been in a static position for the last 4 minutes, and then try to squat heavy again. I don't think that serves most people well at all. And that was also something that Chris said, and that I fully agree with, and I think people should do that. So for example, if I'm doing a 5x5 back squat during that, let's say, 4 minutes rest, I'm walking around the whole time. And what I'll probably do, me personally, when I walk around for let's say the 4 minutes rest, at least twice during the 4 minutes rest, if not 3 times, I'll do like 5 slow air squats. And so I'm just moving my body under no load in the same movement pattern that my legs are using during the heavy lift for that day. And I have found just flushing my legs out, keeping things moving, keeps it from getting stiff. Then when I go back to the bar, now not doing so many air squats that you're tired, like I said, over the course of a 4 minute rest period, I might do 2 sets of 5. I feel infinitely better. Still feel warm, feel ready, but I feel recovered and I feel ready to squat. So the 2 things that I would think most people could walk away from that conversation with would be understanding how to manipulate rest periods if need be. Most people are just not even tracking their rest periods. So that's a huge thing that I think most people could benefit from. And I was guilty of that as well years ago in an early conversation with Chris. When we talked about an 8x200 meter run day I did, I could tell him the times that I ran, and he said, how long were your rest periods? And I was like, I don't know, just kind of until I feel ready to go again. So I was not taking advantage of one of the metrics that I should have been measuring. So whether you're sprinting, lifting, whatever it is, as diligent as you are with tracking your times and tracking your loadings, track those rest periods, because then you have useful data to use at future sessions. And then the other part that I think most people could really benefit from is not just being static during those rest periods, not just plopping on your butt, sitting in a chair, not moving your legs, and scrolling your phone, and then getting back up 4 minutes later and trying to lift maximally again. I don't think that works well for most people. So keeping yourself moving, whether it's gentle walk, some light air squats every now and then like I do, some casual pedaling on a bike, some casual rowing, whatever it is, I think that's a great way to do it. And I think that would help a lot of people. Okay, let's see here. Sarah J. At my old gym, the coach always said, no one does knee push-ups. If you couldn't do a push-up, you would do a hand release push-up. I did knee push-ups in one of the workouts this week and I felt like a traitor. What are your thoughts on that? I think that's very confusing, and I don't know why somebody would say nobody does knee push-ups. That makes no sense to me at all. Great movement, quite frankly, for somebody working their way towards a full push-up. Now you can obviously do elevated push-ups, you can do wall push-ups, but knee push-ups are right in there as well. And knee push-ups are a fantastic way to push yourself past when some fatigue or muscle failure hits in, like you do a regular set of push-ups to failure, and then when they fail, you drop to knee push-ups, you knock out another 5 to 10, you can build some really great stamina that way. So I don't know what the problem with knee push-ups was, and unless I'm missing something, It seems weird that the coach said if you can't do a push-up, then you would do a hand release push-up, which not everybody, but a lot of people find more difficult than a regular push-up. So I don't know why anybody would have an issue with knee push-ups. I think they're fantastic. Okay, a couple more here. This is from Mike M. What goes into programming your Linchpin test workouts? How are these different from your normal thought process when programming? So a lot of the Linchpin tests, and you can find them on our website, did start off as just workouts, regular workouts, if that's what you want to call them. And that weaved into the programming, or I created for a particular day of programming to meet the needs that we had to satisfy. And some of them, made multiple appearances, and I really liked them, either how they laid out, the elegance of them, the whole 9 yards. And I just wanted to create some benchmarks, also, for lack of a better word, for Linchpin. And named workouts a big thing, so I didn't want to be issuing names out left and right. So I just liked as simple and just calling them tests and just numbering them. Test 1, test 2, test 3. And I just as easily, instead of calling them the Linchpin tests, could have put a name for them for a benchmark workout as well. So they're, at their most basic description, Linchpin benchmark workouts. And I tried to make the overwhelming majority of them ones that are ones that we wouldn't mind if you saw over and over again, because they're not too much. And now some of them are, as we well know, a bit of a dosing that you're going to sprinkle that in much less frequently. For example, Linchpin test number 13. That is also quite, you could say, a distinction of a test versus a workout that would pop up on a regular occasion. Linchpin test 13 is so much that it is going to change the course of the rest of your week. And so you wouldn't just throw it in there on a regular basis like you would so many other of the Linchpin test benchmark workouts. And so the thought process was generally the same. And over the course of all the Linchpin tests, it was also to cover a nice range of time domains, loadings, from low skill movements to high skill movements, pulling from the ground, going overhead, the power lifts, the Olympic lifts, various gymnastics movements. You've got bike, you've got running, the whole 9 yards. And so it was kind of cover our bases there as well and make something fun for everybody. Okay, final question from Kane M. I am curious about whether you think you will ever get to the point where you're satisfied with the recent programming to the point where you can just start repeating instead of creating new workouts. I can imagine repeating a period even up to several years, since there is sufficient variation. If you don't anticipate doing this while working, do you think it will be how you eventually retire? Retire. Interesting. Here's, yes to both, I guess, right? I don't even know how long I've been posting Linchpin workouts, like ballpark a decade or something like that. So somebody could just start and just to be good for a decade, and by the time you get to the end of a decade, just start back over. Or there's so much variance in 1 year. Somebody could just, once we finish up 2023, if you only wanted to do something just over and over and over again, you could just do all of 2023, and when you finish the last workout, just start back over again. And that's an entire year's worth of strength and conditioning programming with so much variance and repeats. You would be covered for the rest of your life if you just repeated 2023 over and over again. Then you get somebody like me, I feel a compulsion to program. I love it. I adore it. It's fun. It's I can't shut my brain off. It is what it is. This is going to be coming out of me no matter what. It's I don't know, somebody who likes to write music or likes to paint or likes to whatever, they got to do it. I got to do it. It is what it is. So now the retire thing, that's interesting. I don't know what that would look like, to be quite honest with you. Yeah, that's a crazy thing to even think about. I'm not sure what that what that looks like. I'm sure I'll have to cross that bridge eventually. And yeah, I don't know if it will just be leaving the workouts out there in perpetuity for everyone just to enjoy, or somebody else takes over the community. It'd have to be the right person, that's for darn sure. Because let's not get all sappy and misty-eyed for a minute, but I mean, from my heart, like, I do truly care about the Linchpin community, like, as if we are extended family, and I don't say that lightly. And so if that day, or when that day does come, who to turn it over to would be a really big decision, just because I would be entrusting you to all of them and them to all of you, and that's not something to be taken lightly. So that'll be quite a big thing to tackle one day. So that's it. As always, thanks for the questions. Thanks for being open-minded to pushing this back. We were going to do it this morning at 9:30, but like I said, had to take my little girl in to get her teeth cleaned, and that's it. So as I record this, it's Thursday. Enjoy your rest day, and we'll talk later.